Wikipedia page, but I don't really
I
see.
mean, I don't know. Yeah, it's not really the focus. Okay, so for anyone out there who doesn't know what's going on, because it was like a month ago that I announced the series, I'm doing this thing where I'm looking at what songs of like the 1960s have the longest Wikipedia pages, which took like a year to do to check every page and the word count. So, um, and this is number 14, which is Penny Lane by the Beatles. So yeah, I'm not gonna drop it in the title. They have to watch. There's no, come on. No, this is not a something easy to do. You gotta work for it. Um, no, but yeah, so I think a good way to kind of structure this would just be to start with like kind of how you started, you came by the song, for the first time, like what's your original experience? And what would you say?
Thanks for having me. First off,
Yeah,
second off, some people are setting out fireworks off outside.
I'll
Don't know
keep
if you
that
can
in
hear,
mind.
but yeah, that's happening. Anyway, they're having a party because they know the series is starting and they're just so hyped.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, Penny Lane. Um, First time I heard it, I think I was probably aware of it before this, but it was probably the first time I like knowingly listened to it was listening to Magical Mystery Tour for the first time. And for the longest time, actually, I kind of slept on this song. Um, we did a Beatles ranking on my channel, me and Sam, and it came out number two on my songs list. So I do
Yeah,
absolutely love the song, um, but that has been a slow climb
a slow
because
process.
yeah, it wasn't like an instant Beatles classic for me. I was like, this is a nice pop song, but I'm sure for reasons we'll get into. I think there's a lot of layered intricacies to the song
Yeah,
that kind
for
of make
sure.
it special to me, anyway. And yeah,
Yeah,
so
well,
that was how I first heard it.
for me, almost the exact same thing. Like I just kind of thought it was like a strong song, but for me, it wasn't like a standout when I first kind of came by it. It took a bit later for it to like really sink in, be like, oh yeah, this is not only a highlight of the album, but also of like the entire catalog. Um, but yeah, it's a very kind of, I don't know, it was a big change for them because it was, their first release as like a fully studio band, and along with Strawberry Fields as the flip side of the single. So I think it definitely was kind of a shocker to a lot of people.
Yeah, and I
It's,
think I think there's a lot of like interesting debate on that Penny Lane, Strawberry Fields kind of thing because they're very, very, very different songs. I
yeah.
think that in my Beatles listening, when I first got into the Beatles, I was a big John Lennon guy,
Oh
and then
yeah.
I slowly became more enamored with Paul's sort of whimsy and
Yeah.
playfulness, which I think, yeah, I think the snobby Beatles fans will be like, it's not Strawberry Fields Forever, but I feel like it's on par, if not better than that song in terms of,
Yeah. I think they came at like a similar theme, but they did it in such a different way. And I think it is easily as good, and I would probably argue it's better myself. But I'm very much a Paul fanboy, so that's kind of to be expected. But but yeah, I don't know. There's just a lot going on with this one. I was recent, like I think it's one of Paul's like finest lyrical efforts is one of the things I was thinking about, because it's so like surreal and like there's a lot of ambiguity in what's going on. I mentioned this, but the one of the guys for Stereo Gum described it as like a Lynchian song, which made me really laugh because I could kind of see it if I squint. There's kind of this like off kilter vibe,
yeah, yeah, for sure, yeah, and
but
also because like, I guess. And a point that is getting at is that in a lot of David Lynch's work, he is definitely working with like quite cheesy elements alongside his weirdness. So it's
yeah,
quite he comes at it with a very sort of sincere cheese along with
yeah,
his eerie weirdness, which I think is definitely reflected a little bit in this song.
yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's just a big departure. And I think it's crazy to me, this was the first Beatles song since I want to say Please Please Me that wasn't a number one in the UK. It
Wow.
like flattened out at 2, and a lot of people at the time said like, "Oh, is this sign of like a commercial downturn?"
Only number two. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
but it was a number one in America, so it had that. But only 2, which is I don't know. That's crazy to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think musically too, there's just all the key changes, and it sounds so great. Like I
Yeah.
love that about it.
I
But
think with the key changes, that is like a pretty crucial part to understanding what makes the song so special, right?
yeah,
Because it feels like every chorus is soaring to a whole new level of like wonder. And like I said, the word whimsy is what keeps coming to me because it is that sort of whimsical nature of the song that makes it so alluring. And you're right, the production is to say George Martin did a spot on production job is kind of underselling it with a lot of
yeah,
these, mid 60s Beatles songs. So
yeah. I think like every time the key changes, it's like it like launches you into another level of like the stratosphere. It sounds so great. And yeah, I think George Martin, as always, is a pro. But I was curious about this question, which is something that George Martin himself said, which is that he regrets not holding it for Sergeant Pepper. Like, what do you think about that question? Because I know in the interview he said if it was up to him, he would have put Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane and gotten rid of Lovely Rita and When I'm 64.
he's done Paul so dirty there. That's unbelievable. Like, how are you taking Paul's songs off there? I don't know. I do definitely think that Sergeant Pepper would have been a better album with those two. Again, not my favorite Beatles album. I do still really like it. Um, but with those two songs added, it would have been definitely higher in my estimations. But then it's like I feel like everybody disagrees on the two songs that you'd take off. Like you
Yeah.
hear a lot of Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite and a lot of Within You Without You and a lot of like When I'm 64, and it feels like nobody can agree on it. So it's like if it was
Yeah.
that easy, then like I don't know, I would have been really sad to lose Lovely Rita, especially on Sergeant
Yeah,
Pepper.
I don't know what that call is. That doesn't make much sense to
When
me.
I'm 64 is fun, but it's not doesn't feel essential to the album. And I feel like
Yeah.
Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields Forever kind of do a similar theme quite well in terms of the like.
Well, yeah, I mean, I know that was the original concept. Before it was Sergeant Pepper, it was like all about their childhood, and Strawberry Fields, Penny Lane, and When I'm 64 were like the only tracks that were actually finished for that concept. So
Yeah,
maybe it would have had that, but they kind of settled on a new concept anyway. So I
which
think
wasn't really they didn't really go full on with
a
anyway.
weak concept. Yeah. I think even John Lennon kind of dismissed people
Yeah,
referring to Sergeant Pepper as a concept album, but I think Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane might be the best argument out there you can make for a concept single. I think, if
yeah.
you really think about it. But yeah.
Uh, I can't really think of anything else at the top of my head apart from those singles. That's like one song split over two sides.
Yeah, I think that's a bit of a cheat, you know. But yeah.
Close to the Edge, part one and part two. There you go.
Yeah, you could have honestly, yeah, it would have been interesting to see if the Beatles ever tried something like that, like a full, I mean, they probably could have with Hey Jude, but they ended up just dropping it on one side, which probably a better call, but
Yeah,
still fun
yeah,
to think about.
yeah. And I think that I've got no issue with the sort of what if they were on Sergeant Pepper debate. It's like one of those debates that I feel like in music discourse, especially around bands as big as the Beatles, there's like 5 or 6 questions that just get
Yeah,
floated around and you just talk about endlessly. And
yeah, some
I am a
topics
little
are a
bit
bit
sick of it.
overdone.
I'm a little bit sick of it, but at the same time, I feel like it is an interesting thing to think about because,
Yeah, no, for sure.
but even without those, it was considered like it was put at the top of every list of the greatest album of all time for like 30 years until people
Yeah,
decided it was cool to not like it anymore. So
yeah. I think that's happened. I'm trying to develop a new term. I'm gonna call it over underrated, which I think happened to Sergeant Pepper, where now it's actually become underrated because so many people went from it's the greatest album ever to actually it's not good. Actually, it's not that great. It's not the best. So it's actually transformed and gone totally the other way. So
yeah,
I think, yeah, that has happened. And that's kind of a weird process.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so you got anything else really much to add to the Penny Lane discussion or?
Yeah, just a couple things like about the arrangement that I
Oh
wanted to
yeah.
talk about. It's sort of like the whole song, as you mentioned, it's sort of like an ode to time and place, and there's like it's weird. It sounds sort of like throwbacky to like the 50s with like the
Yeah.
horns and stuff, but also so because it sounds so crisp. It's sort of like quite futuristic as well in a way.
Yeah.
So it's weird. It feels nostalgic, but also doesn't feel like dated or anything. It feels fresh still today, which I think is really cool. I think the keys throughout the song are really nice, and then you get the extra piano that comes on top for
Yeah.
several parts of the song as well, which is really cool. I mentioned the horns. I don't think I can
Yeah.
say anything about the trumpet solo because it's been talked about to death, but it's great. Um,
Yeah.
I was just listening to the song before we went on, and like I feel like even now I've heard it like 100 times, and I feel like I can find new things about it to love and
Yeah.
appreciate. I think it's one of the most dense arrangements that they did.
Yeah, I definitely think so. It's kind of, I don't know, there's so much going on and it's almost going for like a wall of sound thing, but George Martin's production style is so much different from like Phil Spector's that it doesn't sound like it. It just sounds like its own thing. Yeah, for sure. And the trumpet solo is just, I remember reading that like just because of that solo, you're now expected to be able to hit those notes if you're like a piccolo trumpet player because like they were normally considered like really rare ones, but just because this one was so popular, yeah, it's
That's pretty cool.
yeah, no, for
Yeah.
sure.
Other than that, just shines a light on Paul's vocals. There's like a warm atmosphere to the song, and he sings it so well. I couldn't imagine anyone ever covering it. You think about
Yeah,
like Yesterday being the most covered song of all time, supposedly. I don't think I've ever seen a cover of this song. Like,
yeah,
it's kind of interesting. Even like just an acoustic guitar version of it, like nothing. I've never seen any of that kind of stuff.
yeah. Although
Um,
it's funny because I can, even though people say Yesterday's like the most covered song, I really can't think of that many covers. It just doesn't seem like many have actually made an impact.
no, yeah, that's the
Yeah,
thing. I think is that the original arrangement is so minimal and like tasteful that I feel like, yeah, if you do too much, then it's going to be a bit messy. If you don't do enough, it's just going to sound like the original. So it's like, what's the point?
yeah.
But yeah, it's
But
it's totally a and I would say it's maybe the catchiest melody that Paul ever wrote is that chorus. Um,
on it, yeah, maybe.
yeah,
That's a hard question because it's hard to think of a composer with that many catchy melodies under his belt. But but yeah, so thank you so much for coming on the show. And
cool. Thanks for having me.
yeah, no problem. Maybe in the future, but we'll see a return. But yeah, that's number 14. And I'll give a little hint. Number 13, next time, it is also by the Beatles. So a lot of
Surprise,
them are.
surprise.
Yeah, it's I don't know, it's funny, but I don't know. It's interesting because it tells you what's like the most written about because the ones with the longer pages, it's because they have like 100, 200 different sources, like papers and stuff, there are like thesis papers you can find just about this song. It's pretty crazy, but I don't know. It tells you something about how much like popular music has made an impact.
Oh, for sure, yeah. And I think it's quite interesting to look at like these things because I feel like, yeah, it's an interesting metric to go by.
Yeah.
I'll be intrigued to see what else shows up later in the series.
Yeah, I hope you are. Yeah, I thought a good reason why I wanted to do it is number one, it's not a very good metric for actually determining what's a great song. But number two, it's a format no one's done, so
Yeah,
it has value in like novelty. So yeah. But thank you for coming on, and I look forward to the next episode. So time to stop this recording. And this is like the first time I use Zoom. I like booted it up today.